Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Malts and Meeples, where we're back with the top 100 games of all time, 2022 edition, and we are on to my list of 30 through 21. So, 2 more weeks left, which, let me look at the calendar here, should be the Monday after Thanksgiving, Cyber Monday, to finish it off. Not that anybody really thinks that much about Cyber Monday anymore. All sales can just go on forever. That's what we've learned. But have an old fashioned with me today. And let's dive into the list here. This list has a couple of solo only games on it and a few roll and writes. So, I guess probably not some things that are too shocking for what I like, but maybe a little bit higher than I thought they might be, at least for like the solo only games. Starting out with number 30, we have Sushi Go Party. Sushi Go Party is a drafting game set collection, one that excuse me, one that's just kind of an evergreen for me, where I'm always interested in sitting down and playing it because, well, with Sushi Go Party, you can get a ton of different combinations with it. So I can create combos that I've never played before. There's enough different like appetizers and specialty items and your main courses, desserts, that you could play for ages and never really see the same combination, which means, yeah, your strategy probably doesn't change massively, but it might change a little bit. Really fun one. This is one that works well with a bigger group too. I think plays up to 8, which for a game that's a little bit more of a gamer type game, I like that it plays at that higher player count. It means that I don't have to pull out a party game all the time when I'm looking for, say, a game to have for a game night. If we have 8 people, I can pull out that one. And I have another one higher on the list that I also tend to pull out fairly often. At number 29, we're going to have Pitch Car. Pitch Car is a dexterity flicking game that is just racing around a track, taking turns flicking your car. If it goes off the track, you put it back where you flick from and basically lose that forward momentum. I love this game just because there's so much you can do with it. I actually want to get another base set just to have some more of the normal pieces for it, but I have everything, I think, for it at this point. With, I guess, the only thing I don't have is like the powder that you use to keep the track from getting like tacky and as you're sliding stuff. But man, it's fun. It plays 8, and this is very much a party game, but it's a great one for a really wide variety of ages, and you can make it as complex or as simple as you want. Like, I set up simple courses when I'm like, yeah, okay, this is a good kind of start the night or end the night game with Pitch Car. If it's going to be more of the focal point, that's when I start to add in like the ramps, the second level, the loop-de-loop, stuff like that, where all of a sudden now you have a much more challenging course. So it's going to take a little bit longer to get through, but I guess the other thing that I want to mention about this one, because there's another piece of it that I really enjoy, is that when somebody has a good shot, everybody's excited for them. If somebody has a bad shot, everybody groans for them. It's a competitive game, but you're never like, haha, you got knocked off the track, or haha, that failed miserably for you. It's more about the excitement of when somebody has that phenomenal shot, that all of a sudden you're like standing up and you can't believe that happened. You're always standing up on this one because you're walking around the table constantly to play it. Then let's see, this is 39. So 38, we're going to have Black Sonata. So this is one of the solo games. Black Sonata is a solo deduction game, which when I first heard about it, I was like, I don't know that this sounds like it should work. There's a few games where, or a few mechanics where you're like, I don't think that makes sense. And with Black Sonata, solo deduction doesn't really make that much sense, but it worked really well. So you are trying to track kind of the black lady, lady in black, who is Shakespeare's lover, something like that. And you're trying to figure out which one of these historical ladies who potentially could have been in his writing that it is. And you're doing that via deduction. You're finding out information about who it potentially could be, like the various symbols on the character. All well, there's a deck of cards moving the lady in black around so that she moves in a consistent pattern. It's fascinating how it works. And I mean, for a solo game, it feels so different than anything else that I've played. Then at 37, we're going to have Cartographers. I actually just played Cartographers on Saturday. Had a blast with it. I have everything for it, and well, the big box is out of room at this point in time, so any more expansions, I'm going to have to trash the insert to make it work. But this is a roll and write game about building out a map. There's two main things that make this one stand apart. The first being that there are monsters. So you're making your map, and there are certain areas you'll mark down that there are monsters. But you don't mark on your sheet that there are monsters or where they are. Your opponent, either to your left or right, they're going to be the ones who mark that down on your sheet. So they're trying to get it in the worst spot for you. A spot that would break up scoring, but also a spot where now they're separated. Like the monsters don't have anything adjacent to them, because any open spot next to a monster is worth -1 point. And it's just a fun little twist for a roll and write to have that interaction. There's really no way to get somebody to not put it in a bad spot for you, but when it comes back, now that's something new you have to think about and deal with. The other thing with this game that is really interesting is the scoring. So the scoring, you have 4 different scoring objectives out there. You have A, B, C, and D. And you play over 4 rounds, 4 different seasons: spring, fall, or spring, summer, fall, and winter. In spring, you score the first 2 objectives, A and B. Summer, you score B and C. Fall, guessed it, C and D. Winter, you're back to scoring A again as well as D. It's a nice little twist, and you have to think through how you're going to score. And sometimes, like when we played on Saturday, one person had a round where they scored 35 out of their 49 points. Now, they didn't have a super high score, but like they scored negative in one season and then 35, which was probably the highest score for a single season by anybody in the game, in another one. So like you can focus in on trying to build up for that one season where you score so exceedingly well, or you can try and nickel and dime it the whole way through and figure that out. Like I tend to split it up a little bit more and try and get some positive points in every one, but I mean sometimes the option of getting a huge amount of points in a season might be the best play. So that, I believe, gonna look at my list here. Cartographers was number 27. At 26, we're gonna have Super Fantasy Brawl. This is a 2-player game. It can be played with more, but Really, it's a two-player game, head-to-head skirmish game of trying to knock out your opponent, trying to complete objectives, things like that. And it just works really well. One of the things I love about this game, which I need to play more because I have more characters for it, is the number of characters that it comes with. It comes with so many different characters, and you can draft characters. So you're just picking, like, oh, I want this person, and this person on my team. And you can build towards whatever style you want to play as, or you can just pick the coolest ones based off of the minis. The other thing that I enjoy about this one is that it's to a certain number of points. It's not just a situation where you're trying to knock out all of your opponents. Like, you're not trying to take out all three of your opponent's characters. In fact, they come back onto the board once they're knocked out. So nobody's ever out of it. So you get points for knocking people out, but you also get points for completing objectives. So it's kind of that two-pronged approach of, okay, when can I knock one of my opponent's figures off the board, and how can I potentially use that moment to be able to get the extra points? And with getting the extra points, the objectives are not scored at the end of the round, which I really like. Instead, the players check at the start of their round to see if they have completed one of the objectives. If they have, they get the points for it. But if not, now I get a chance, even if they set themselves up perfectly for their next turn to be able to score the objective, I have a chance to knock them off the board, to break up what they're doing. So everything is a nice challenge in the game, and having the variety of different characters, and I hope they keep on coming out with more. We need probably a different shelf somewhere to put them up because they all look cool. That is really exciting. It's just a fun, quick battler too. It's like 30 minutes a game, which is, it's really fast for how big the game looks like it should be. I believe this then takes us to number 25. Number 25 is going to be Under Falling Skies, the other solo game on the list. Under Falling Skies is a combination, I say, of Space Invaders meets Independence Day. So you have your rows of bad guys coming down. Really, they're coming down in columns. As well as then you're trying to research and figure out a way to take out the mothership. So that's kind of where the two things come from. But you're doing this by dice allocation. And you place a single die per column. That die is going to be how far the enemy ship there moves down. And so you're trying to match them up, get them to land on certain spots, potentially where you can blow them up, as well as maintaining and managing the amount of energy you have, doing research to be able to eventually blow up that mothership. It's just, I don't know, there's something about the puzzle for this game that it feels better than most other games with kind of that puzzle to them, especially for a solo game. This feels like a bigger solo game than a lot of them out there. And so I really love diving into this one. Plus there's a mini campaign. I haven't played it yet, but you can play through different combinations of skies and cities with different powers, stuff like that. Even a comic to read through with it, which is a ton of fun. Then we have here, coming up next at number 24, one that has been on the list from the very beginning. I think it was in the 40s last year, I want to say. But it's also been as high as like 3. So moves all over the place, and that is going to be Betrayal at House on the Hill. Now, I haven't actually played it in probably over a year, but I love playing Betrayal at House on the Hill because it is one of those kind of horror games like a Final Girl, which was number 33, where you really have that horror feeling to it. And it's a horror movie that you play through. You go into this haunted house, you're exploring it, your characters are leveling up, and that part is all cooperative until some event happens, there's a betrayal, and now one of the people you were working with, potentially none, but most likely one of the people you're working with, has betrayed you all, and they now have their specific way to win the game, and you have your specific way to stop them. The negative about this game, and it is a pretty big negative, uh, is that the haunts, like the directions for the players who are haunting, player who is haunting, and players who are being haunted, are poor. They should be better than what they are for when it becomes a one versus all game. I know people have other complaints about stuff like, oh, well, what one person gets all the good gear and then they're the betrayer. It's over pretty quickly. Well, it's still fun. Like the whole rest of the that part of the game, in my opinion, is fun, and it's over quickly. So I don't really have a complaint about that. It's more the sitting down and reading through the specific objectives that you have. Sometimes it takes a bit of time and a bit of translation to figure out precisely what they mean. But if you want that horror feel, definitely works great. Next up, I believe this is 23, we have a roll and write with Super Skill Pinball 4K. A mouthful of a name, but this is basically a pinball roll and write. And for a roll and write that is, I mean, it is an abstracted game of a pinball machine, it still feels a fair amount like a pinball machine. You are using your flippers to launch the ball up. You're trying to get it caught up in some bumpers and bouncing around to score you points. And it has a specific direction that it kind of rotates around the board as it bounces. So it really feels like a good simulation of playing pinball and a fun simulation of playing pinball. It's a situation where I play it and I'm not like, oh, well, I'd love to have a pinball machine that I'm here playing instead. This is just a nice, small, pretty compact game that is a lot of fun to play. And the base game comes with four tables. There's an expansion with another 4 tables. There's a Star Trek expansion with another 4 tables. There's a Christmas movie expansion with another 4 tables. So you can get a ton of different content for it and really pick and choose what you like. I like the basic box a lot. I think the tables in there are a lot of fun. It also has a good one to learn on, which is always a nice thing. But if you want to play a roll and write that feels like playing pinball, great option. And another roll and write game, though this one, how you get the numbers is not by rolling, it's by flicking discs. Sonora is probably the most combo-tastic roll and write game that I've ever played. By that I mean, so you flick your discs onto the board and they have different numbers, 1 through 5. And then you use those numbers to fill in areas on your board. And depending on what area the disc landed in when you flick them, that determines the area that, well, you get to fill in on your board. And everywhere you fill in, you're unlocking new abilities. You're unlocking, and not so much new abilities, you're unlocking new things you can place on the other sections of the board. So you might be on the coyote section. You finish off something on the coyote section. Now that gives you a bonus, which allows you to fill in something on the rabbit section. That filling in that thing on the rabbit section now allows you to fill in something on the owl section. And the whole game just works like that. So You have a few minutes of flicking, and then everybody just is running through their combos, and it is a ton of fun with really high scores, but it's one where you feel like you've earned the high score. It's not just giving out points for the sake of giving points. It's giving you points because you were clever enough to be able to combo stuff together. Next up after that, we have the final one on this section, number 21, Deception, Murder in Hong Kong. Now, if you've read my stuff over on nerdologist.com, which, I mean, shameless plug, read my articles there. I think they're entertaining, I hope. But Deception, Murder in Hong Kong is a social deduction game. I do not like social deduction games. I do not like Resistance. I do not like Mafia. I do not like Werewolf. I do not like Avalon. I do not like Werewords. I could go on and on. I do not like Secret Hitler. I do not like Donner Dinner Party. I do not like, yeah, you get the point. But I love Deception, Murder in Hong Kong. It still has the same thing. There's one person who is the murderer. But they have, and everybody has these, you have weapons and clues in front of you. And the murderer picks a weapon and a clue from in front of them. And then you have the person who is it, the person who is kind of leading the event, is the forensic scientist. And all they're doing is sending up reports that might be like, oh, the victim was young. Okay, well, maybe that tells us something about a clue. Maybe there's a toy or something like that that we can hone in on that might help us start to narrow down who the killer might be. And the forensic scientist has something like 6 or 8, I think 8 different reports that they can send up. And as they're sending up some of them, they get rid of others. But it's just a clever game. And my big complaint about a lot of social deduction games is you start playing and you're there in the game, and the game for the first round kind of plays itself because you have no information to go off of. But Deception, Murder in Hong Kong, the game doesn't really start until the first report shows up. And you immediately have something to go on. You immediately can start looking around the table and being like, okay, these are the things that fit for like a murder weapon. If the location, let's say it was a location's a construction site. Okay, what might be found at a construction site? You get really focused in on finding murder weapons that could be at a construction site. Well, maybe it was actually the clue. And you always have information to go off of in this game as you're still trying to puzzle it out. It's a combination of deduction and social deduction that I really like, because you're trying to puzzle it out logically by looking at the reports that are coming up and being like, okay, how do these fit together? But then you're also trying to keep an eye on, like, okay, who's deflecting the most from themselves? Is somebody really trying to get us not to look at a certain thing or something like that? And it has a nice balance between the two. But there we have it, 30 through 21. Let's do a quick run through of them again. At 30, we have Sushi Go Party, a drafting set collection game. Love the party version. The regular version is good too. Party version is better just because you have more combinations you can play with. At 29, we're going to have Pitch Car. This is a dexterity flicking racing game. It's great for all ages, and it's always a fun time when it's set up on the table and you just look at a crazy track that you're going to be racing around. 28, we have Black Sonata, a solo deduction game where you're trying to figure out who the lady in black is from Shakespeare's sonatas and tracking and figuring out the pattern that the lady in black is moving so that you can catch her and find out information about her before you make that final clue-like guess as to who they are. 27, we have Cartographers. This is a roll and write game about making a map, but it's a fairly interactive roll and write game because whenever a monster shows up, you pass your sheet to the person next to you, either left or right, depending on the card, and they're going to put a monster in the most disadvantageous location for you to keep you from scoring points, to give you negative points. At 26, we're going to have Super Fantasy Brawl. This is a 2-player tactical battling game where you're trying to knock out your opponent's characters, though they will come back, as well as complete missions to score points. And it's a quick race to 5, really simple card play, good rules for it, a fast, fun time. At 25, I believe, let's double check my numbering here. At 25, we have Under Falling Skies. This is another solo game that I call kind of a cross between like Space Invaders and Independence Day, where you're using dice and placing them to research the mothership, how to be able to destroy it, to be able to blow up the smaller enemy ships, to get energy so you have enough energy to do all of that, and to keep the enemy ships going down at the right speed so that they're not hitting land and basically speeding up the timer for you. At 24, we have Betrayal at House on the Hill. This is a horror movie-esque board game where you're exploring a haunted house and then eventually somebody is a betrayer. It's swingy, but it's so thematic, and if you can get past like maybe the little bit of clutchiness of some of the haunts, I think it's a fantastic experience. At 23, we have Super Skill Pinball 4K. This is another roll and write game that simulates a pinball machine, and it simulates it well. It's a fun one with pretty simple rules, but it's also a bigger, like longer roll and write than a lot of games. At 22, we're going to have Sonora. This is a a roll and write game, but instead of rolling dice, you are flicking discs. And Sonora is great because it has a ton of combos to it. As you flick your discs and they land in certain spots for the end of the round, you're then filling in on your sheet. And as you fill in, you're basically always getting more and more and more combos as you go. Just a blast to play. Has I think more thinking than a number of roll and write games, but also has that fun element of flicking. And then finally, at number 21, we have Deception Murder in Hong Kong. This is a social deduction, big group game that I love. You get to try and figure out who a murderer is, or maybe you are the murderer. And the rolls and everything, it just works really well. You always have information to go off of, which is something I don't love about a lot of social deduction games. You're just guessing to start, or the first round could play itself out in complete silence before you get any information. But Deception Murder in Hong Kong immediately drops you into the game. So, first off, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully this was fun. If you're checking this out later, let me know which one of the games you would want to be playing down in the comments section below. Please do give the video a thumbs up. That helps more people find the video as well. But with that, let's see. Few things I always like to mention at the end here. First off, I mentioned it before, check out nerdologists.com. The link is in the description below. As well as the Malts and Meeples 10-Minute Marvel podcast that I do with a friend. It's more a 30-minute Marvel podcast now, but we're telling and discussing and talking about Marvel stories, movies, things like that, diving into characters, hopefully in a nice kind of digestible size podcast. And if you want to know about upcoming videos here, first off, subscribing and clicking the notification bell, it's going to give you an idea of when I go live. Generally, when I go live is 8:30 on Mondays and 8 p.m. on Wednesdays, both of those times Central. Mondays, I'm still working my way through the top 100, obviously. 2 more weeks. But then probably more discussions, maybe some top 10s, conversations about board games, playing some of these smaller solo games that I don't get to the table. And down below me on this table here for Wednesdays, we are playing through Chronicles of Drunagor. So come join for these and join in the chat and let me know what you think of the games. But with that, bottoms up.